All right, welcome to Professional Leadership. In this video, we're going to go over the third component of our model that we've been going through. So the first part dealt with your integrity, your character. The second part of the model that we went over was the attitude that the leader brings. And then in this video, we're going to go over the productivity of the leader. Now, just to kind of refresh, in this model, kind of this first section are the character traits, the internal qualities that the leader is expected to have in order to influence the culture of the organization, right? So we'll be getting into, in a few weeks, the decision-making process and the holding people accountable to certain expectations. All of those things we'll get to later. But this first section is really about who the leader is supposed to be. And who the leader is supposed to be is one of the greatest influences on organizational culture. Far more impactful often than just what a leader says, what a leader orders, what a leader wants done. All of those things are important. The behaviors of the leader are important, but really it's the character, who the leader is, that is the determining factor often of the culture that is developed around them. It's the idea that you can't produce what you are not, no matter how much you rant and rave or order or command people to do something. If you don't have it in you, it's very difficult for you to produce it around you, right? And so these first lessons of the model deal with the type of person that you want to become, and that is your foundation. So that's why we're doing that first. And then building on that foundation, we will talk about some leadership practices, some decision-making skills, and things of that nature. So today is productivity. And I'm going to go through a few thoughts. One of them is the drive of the leader, right? Your internal commitment to work hard. Some people may call this your work ethic. It is not just the amount of hours that you put in, right? But it's often a combination of your focus. You need wisdom so that you're driving. You could work a whole lot of hours, but without wisdom, maybe you're still not productive, right? So I would say that your productivity is a combination of drive plus wisdom, right? Equals productivity. Okay. If you have a lot of wisdom with no drive, you know what to do, but a lot of stuff doesn't get done. If you have a lot of drive with no wisdom, you're really busy, but there's a lot of waste, a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of effort without the maximum level of productivity. So as a leader, the type of person that you want to become is someone who is growing in wisdom, right? You committed yourself to study your craft, your trade, your industry. Not just know about it, but have a wisdom, right? You can have knowledge about your industry, but for every industry there is a wisdom that comes with it, which is more than just knowledge. It is practical application. It's understanding not just what, but why. There's a wisdom to every industry. And then internally, there is a drive. So these are character traits within the leader, right, that they are developing, that you are viewing your industry, trying to not just know the facts, not just trying to duplicate what other people are doing, but you want to understand why they're doing it so that you are growing in wisdom. And as you grow in wisdom and you commit yourself with a strong work ethic, then your productivity will increase. And it is your wisdom that influences the systems that you are accountable for, and it is your drive that often influences the work ethic of the people around you, right? That people try and reach to whatever standard is set by leadership in terms of work ethic, right? This is one of the single most important influences that a leader can contribute to their organization is work ethic. It's very rare that people below a leader will outwork them, right? I mean, it happens, but if you have a lazy leader, you will find that many other people don't want to work the extra and do the extra things, go the extra mile, if they don't feel that that is the culture of the organization, right? But when an organization sees that the leader is driven and hardworking, then they tend to pick up on that. They begin to say, okay, well, there's a standard here that we have to meet, right? Okay, so drive is essential. Drive can come in a couple of different things. I would say drive is not just, pure effort, right? So drive can come on the one hand with work ethic, right? So this is work ethic. So that's just really, putting in the amount of hours, not being lazy, not goofing off at work, those types of things. Being driven, going the extra mile when necessary. Then the other part of drive that I think is important comes with initiating new projects. Initiating new projects. That I put this under drive because a driven leader, right, often isn't satisfied with the status quo, right, or just to maintain. That often a very driven leader, you will notice a combination of work ethic and a desire to move forward with progress, right? And I think both of those are subsumed under this category of drive, right? Now, not everybody has both of these, right? But both of these can be contributing factors of drive. So your work ethic, how hard you work, right? That's one part of your drive. The other part of your drive is, are you driven to stretch the boundaries of what your company can do? Are you driven to explore new things? Are you driven to start new projects, right? Are you driven to build in a new way? Are you driven to try new things, right? And so all of that is drive. So some people's drive is emerging from their work ethic, and some people's drive is emerging from their desire to see change and new projects developed. And both of those can be contributing factors to drive, right? So both of those are important. And then, just under wisdom, I would also put two categories of knowledge and application, right? That the contributing factors of wisdom are knowledge. You have to have a certain level of knowledge in order to think correctly about anything. And then you have to understand application, and you might even put a third one in there of experience. Experience contributes to wisdom as well often. And so, but the key to wisdom is the ability to blend knowledge and application to meet the demands of the moment, right? And this is where sometimes experience can be a stumbling block to wisdom. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that experience can also mean that you are so rooted in the way that things have always been that you are inflexible, right? And so real wisdom can make good use of experience, right? If there is experience there, wisdom can draw on that for the needs of the moment, right? But wisdom is not locked into only the experiences that it's had, that there is a flexibility with wisdom that allows you to take knowledge and apply it for the needs of the moment And that's really what wisdom is. That wisdom draws from experience, but is not limited by experience, right? In its ability to take knowledge, apply it in, whatever the correct way is. It doesn't always have to be profound. It doesn't always have to be new, but it does need to be a correct application of knowledge in order for it to be wisdom, right? So if you put all of this together, you become very productive. Strong work ethic, willingness to try new projects, a deep knowledge, right? Comprehensive knowledge, well-read, well-knowledgeable of your industry, good experience to draw on, and the ability to apply your experience and knowledge in effective ways, right? All of those things contribute to your productivity, right? Okay. Let me give you a couple other thoughts in terms of a spiritual kind of take on this. Two things I want to deal with in terms of the spirituality of productivity, right? So one deals with this concept of ambition, right? Ambition. Is it right for a Christian to want to be ambitious, right? I think ambitious is too broad of a word to give a yes or a no answer to that, because there can be ambition that is self-centered, self-seeking, and often that is condemned in the Scriptures as being something that you want to stay away from, that your ultimate purpose is not end with yourself, right? So it's not that you can't benefit from your ambition, but if your ambition is all about yourself, then that means that your success, the end goal is your own pleasure, your own happiness, your own success, your own victory. And ultimately, that is not enough. As a Christian, you don't want success to end with your happiness. You want ultimately to glorify the Lord with your life. And so I would put a word in front of this to make this a little better. And we're going to say godly ambition, right? And so the idea here is that there is an ambitious state of mind that wants to do more, that wants to be effective, that wants to leave a mark, that wants to be influential, that wants to glorify the Lord, that wants to see victory for the kingdom. And there is a godly ambition that is driven by a desire to see the Lord glorified through your life. And so you are eager and you are driven to see those things happen. And so I think that is a worthwhile concept, to have a godly ambition, right? That you are driven, you are motivated, you have high goals, you want to see great success, but it is within the worldview of all of this being a glorification of the Lord, right? That you are part of His kingdom and that you are serving Him, and that your ambition is to serve Him in the best way that you can, right? Your ambition is not to be better than other people or to overcome other people for the sake of your own glory, but you want to be successful, fruitful, abundant, because you are part of God's kingdom and you are a reflection of His light in the world, right? Okay, so there is a godly ambition that I think is really a guiding principle for our productivity, right? Why do we want to be productive? That's an important question about our motivation, right? Godly ambition. Then the other one is in Galatians, the Bible talks about the various fruits of the Spirit, right? So these are characteristics that are produced by the Spirit of the Lord, right? And I believe anything produced by the Spirit of the Lord has the capacity to be even greater than something that could be produced by the flesh, right? So these are fruits of the Spirit of the Lord, right? And so one of them, the last one often in the list, is self-control. I think self-control and the fruit of self-control, the empowering of the Holy Spirit to give us self-control, to develop and build self-control within us, is a key spiritual gift for productivity, right? That our work ethic often requires self-control. Your flesh doesn't always want to get up in the morning. Your flesh doesn't always want to put in the extra work. Your flesh doesn't always want to do over and above, right? And so you have to have self-control. You have to have self-control to apply yourself in the right areas, to take the time to study. So on the other side of it, on the other side of work ethic was wisdom. And so that requires some study, some observation, some meditating on principles, those types of things. All of those come from self-control, right? That often a wise person is not always wise because they had greater mental capacity than someone else. Sometimes they are wise because they had greater self-control than someone else. And they were willing to control themselves, and instead of going out and doing something or watching TV or just, entertainment of some sort, they put themselves in a position to continue learning and to be positioned to be excellent in their field, maybe going back to school, things of that nature. And so sometimes someone is smarter than someone else, not because they had greater mental ability, but because they had greater self-control. Sometimes your workers that will work with you. Sometimes what makes a great employee is not always their talent and their ability. There are a lot of talented people who have no self-control. So particularly in secular areas, you may get people who were out partying the night before, particularly if you live in, places where you're hiring college students or younger people. Those types of jobs, if you're a leader or a manager in one of those scenarios, sometimes what you're looking for is someone who has self-control more than someone who has just pure natural ability. So that's on one end of the extreme, but in many of our areas of life, it's not always the most intelligent person. It is someone who has got a strong blend of wisdom with their self-control, right? Your work ethic and your drive is a reflection of self-control. Your ability to take on new projects is a reflection of self-control. Knowing when to stretch yourself, right? So it's not always just about doing more, right? Sometimes self-control is restraint, right? If you have a fast-moving mind or you're in a fast-moving industry, maybe you can't take on every project. It may wear you down. In that case, self-control doesn't drive you to do more. Self-control will drive you to be smarter with your time allocation, right? So self-control goes in a variety of directions, right? But it is an important and valuable key for productivity, right? Anyone that can't control themselves will often find that their lack of control is a great contributing factor to loss of productivity, right? Their lack of self-control will almost always be a contributing factor to loss of productivity, right? Okay, so let me give you a couple other things. When you're acting in a leadership role, right, you want to hold people accountable for their productivity, right, while at the same time modeling productivity in your own life. That your productivity and their productivity may be two different kinds of productivity. So maybe you're in a more intellectual capacity where you're trying to create system and you're doing leadership from that point of view and you're not doing any of the manual labor, right? But you still must show the work ethic and the productivity, and you must model that even if you're not doing the manual labor side of it, right? You don't necessarily have to have the same category of productivity to create a culture of productivity around you, right? And to be an influence for that. All right. Let me give you just a couple other things here in this lesson. I think one other area of productivity that fits with godly ambition and self-control. In fact, we can kind of combine these into being a wise steward. Right? I believe a wise steward is a combination of someone who has godly ambition, right? So they're setting worthwhile goals. They're applying themselves in the right direction, right? So that's all wrapped up in godly ambition, right? That you're worthwhile goals, that you're moving your life in a direction that is honoring to the Lord. And you combine that with a spirit of self-control, with a spirit-inspired self-control. I think those are the building blocks of being a wise steward, right? Because a wise steward has to make the most of their opportunities, right? Because you're stewarding not just resources, right? Resources become a good template for understanding stewardship, right? So we often hear, stewardship being connected with resources. How well did you manage the money? How well did you manage the investments? Those types of things are often connected with stewardship, but that's not all there is to stewardship. Sometimes you need to steward your calling, right? That if God has called you to do something, you need to have the godly ambition and the self-control to pursue the thing that God has called you. Because you could be really great in an industry that God doesn't want you to be in, and you are still not a wise steward of what God has given you and the opportunities, because you are a steward not just of resource, but I think a greater thing that you must think of is that you are a steward of opportunity that God has given you, right? Opportunity and purpose that the Lord has placed in front of you. And so really what we're trying to do is not necessarily steward any one individual piece, right? Although we do all of that. The big picture of stewardship is found with this, that you are stewarding the opportunity that God puts in front of you. You are stewarding the purpose that God has for your life. And in that level of stewardship, you apply godly ambition and self-control so that you are moving your life in the direction that fulfills the purpose that God has for your life and takes advantage of the opportunities that He has placed in front of you, right? And so all of that is wise stewardship, right? And it takes wise stewardship to be productive. So that's why I put it in this lesson that we need to be wise stewards of the opportunities that God has given us and of the purpose that He has placed in front of us for our life. And if we are stewards of these things, these are the big picture items, right? Opportunity and purpose. Underneath that, you may find yourself needing to be a steward of a variety of smaller issues, individual components of this. So that could be the resources, right? It could be you need to be perhaps a wise steward of people, right? You could be a wise steward of your organization, right? Or your particular section within a company, right? Okay, because opportunities and purpose, those are big things. Sometimes that's bigger than just the department that you work in for that particular season. So you in stewarding God's purpose, it may require you to steward a smaller organization for a season, or whatever the organization is that you are in. You will steward that. You'll steward resources. You'll be a wise steward over the people that God has placed in your life to influence them. And so there's a variety of subcategories that we specifically need to steward. But I think the big picture for properly understanding stewardship is that you are stewarding opportunities. You are stewarding the purpose that God has placed over your life. And these two contributing factors are huge. A godly ambition, so that you're not selling yourself short. You're not pursuing less than what God had. I always think of the story of the talents. And the only one that God was upset with was the one who did not multiply and did not expand what God had given him, right? The one that had ambition and the one that moved forward the most was the one that got the most credit from the Lord, right? The one that took his 5 talents and multiplied it to 10 was blessed of the Lord. And God honored that. Jesus clearly said that that is the correct behavior that he's looking for. And so I think godly ambition is important, right? And then I think self-control is vital for moving it along in an orderly fashion, right? And then all of that contributes to your ability to oversee your opportunity and your purpose. Your purpose could span a variety of jobs, a variety of organizations, a variety of contexts, right? And so that's why it becomes a kind of a broad category. All right, and then let me give you just one other thought. That what constitutes productivity at any given season, right? It's something that the leader must think about. The leader must come to an understanding of what productivity means for them in that season, right? It's not always the same. What is productivity for one organization is not necessarily productivity for another. That every organization, every leader must be able to define and understand and envision and then articulate to everyone else what productivity should look like for that season, right? So I'll call this productivity defined, right? Productivity defined. And I think it's important to remember that in any given window of time, what makes for productivity could be different, right? That different seasons in organizations require different levels of productivity, different types of productivity. Let me give you an example. Sometimes in your organization, what your organization needs to be producing is new ideas, right? Maybe productivity is not just producing the same old products, right? Maybe maximum productivity is maintaining the status quo and adding in some new ideas. Or take a startup, an entrepreneurial venture. Their initial productivity is not about producing a product. It's about producing an idea, right, to start with. So that's one season. As the entrepreneur begins to get things started and begins to grow, they immediately begin to figure out that they have a lot of work to do on creating efficient systems, right? To get the systems of the organization functioning properly and to be efficient and smooth and maximize and be positioned to be able to be scaled, to grow larger. And so productivity in that season may not be about producing a whole bunch of product either. It could be about producing a system that works better. And so the leader in that capacity does not need to judge themselves by the number of products they produce, but perhaps needs to judge themselves by how good of a system they're able to create for future growth, right? So productivity could look like producing a system. It could produce an idea. It could produce a system. Sometimes it is producing a product. Sometimes you've got too much product, and productivity is producing sales, right? Sometimes productivity is boosting organizational morale. And so you're spending your time producing greater morale within the organization by walking around, encouraging, speaking to situations. Sometimes productivity is putting out fires, right? That can, if that's all you ever do, it's probably not good. But occasionally, what you produce is a solution to a problem within the organization, right? And that's what putting out fires is, right? And so productivity can be a very broad concept. And so when you're thinking about increasing productivity within your organization, guard against the tendency to want to define productivity too narrowly, right? So what we're really after is a flexibility of thought within the leader that helps them to go from one type of productivity to another depending on the needs of the situation. And so there is a wisdom that the leader brings to the table of being able to analyze a situation and understand what type of productivity is most effective for that given context. And that's really an essential trait for leaders, to be able to not just want to do the same thing over and over and over again with repetition, but understanding the flexibility and adaptability that is required to bounce from category to category of productivity so that you have a well-rounded and effective organization, right? Okay, so that's productivity. As an organizational leader, you begin with your integrity. You add to that a positive, faith-filled attitude that affects everyone in the organization, and then you begin to model a breadth and variety of productivity that influences the work ethic and the drive of everyone else in the organization, right?